Is Mel Kiper really still the best of the best? Today, we're going to be reviewing the past 3 final mock drafts from Mel Kiper Jr. Starting out with the 2022 NFL Draft, he ended up having an 87.5% players taken accuracy. These are basically, hey, if he ends up taking this guy, did he go in the first round? And 87.5% is pretty solid. I'm going to be comparing these versus my own mock drafts to give you guys a little bit of a framework, because I don't want to spoil a little too much, because I'll be ending up doing my own self-analysis when it comes to summer. But I ended up doing 81.3%. So, of course, I wasn't as good back in 2022, but 87.5, just FYI, is the best that you could probably legitimately ask for on a standard basis. And that year had a lot of curveballs. The exact player, so this is the exact pick, the exact player, 18.75% of the time, he ended up getting it perfectly right. Honestly, that is incredible. There's only a couple drafts that I think would end up having a range like this. I got 9.4, and honestly, even in this past year, I got 25%. So it is a really good mark. Half of all of the picks he ended up getting were either the right player or the right position. So let's just say Sauce Gardner versus, Derek Stingley. Both would end up counting for the teams that respectively picked them because, well, both of them are corners, right? So I do think that, honestly, as a 50% mark, that is incredible. That matches my best. And he didn't do trades back then. But let's break this down by the AFC and the NFC, because I think it's key to say, hey, where should we trust Mel Kiper? And honestly, for the Chargers, did not do necessarily great that year. Ended up missing Vegas, Denver, Indy, Cleveland, and Miami. All didn't have picks. But for Kansas City, he got 1 out of the 2 correct. And this does include whether it is the same position or the same player. For Jacksonville, he got it right on the nose. If you get 100%, that is the exact player. So just keep that in mind. 50% could be 1 out of 2. It could be that if a team has 2 picks, they end up getting, both of the positions right and not the players. So keep that in mind as well. So Jacksonville got it right on the money. Houston ended up missing. And then for Tennessee, Pittsburgh ended up getting the right position, wrong player. Buffalo, he got it correct. And New York, and he ended up getting 1 of the 2 perfectly. And the other one he ended up getting, partially correct. So it's a little bit interesting. Feel free to keep this in mind. This is going to be something we evaluate a little bit more down the line. For the NFC, again, he ended up being primarily accurate the most on the Cowboys, getting the exact prospect they ended up drafting, and then ended up going a little bit less accurate for the majority of teams there. For Philadelphia, he did get, I believe it was Adetomiwa Adebawore, if I'm not mistaken, for his last pick. So, very intriguing time right there. But regardless, let's get into the 2023 draft. No need to, beat around the bush here. He was 87.1% accurate in terms of the players in the first round. I think that's great. For me, I had an 80.6. And granted, I was trying to get cutesy back then. I was trying to do I'm going to get the trades, yada, yada. And so I think that's fair enough to say, 87.1 is a really, really good score. The exact player at a 9.68%. Not necessarily what you're really looking for. If I'm not mistaken, that's 3 out of the 31 selections. So, definitely some room to grow there for Mel. Ended up myself getting 16.1%, which is good to see. I actually beat Mel in something. And then the exact position, 38.71%, which is a big drop off from that 50 that he had the year before in 2022. For me, ended up having a 32.3% in that. He did end up predicting some trades and none of them hit. But looking at this is going to look a little bit more pleasing to the eye. My dumbass didn't end up color coding the other one. So FYI, it's going to look pretty for the rest of the episode. But regardless, if it is in green, it is good. If it is not in green, it is not good. And if it is in yellow, it's okay. I miscolored. You guys know how I roll here. Ended up miscoloring the Jets. But regardless, the bottom line is he ended up getting the player or position right for Houston, Jacksonville, Indy, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and the Chargers. Great on him for being able to do that. Again, we're going to look at this in totality. I think it's going to matter a lot more when we come to the final results. So I do just want you guys to see on a standard basis, did he get it correct? For the NFC, he was pretty brutal for the 2023 draft, only getting the position right for New Orleans and Chicago and the player right for Carolina. Carolina had the number 1 pick. So it's kind of easy there. Ended up not doing a great job at all in that department. But to be fair, not many of us did all that well. Now, overall accuracy for the most recent draft. Yes, this is going to be a little bit of a quicker video because I want to be able to focus the most on the end because who gives a shit, right? But in the 2024 draft, 85.94%. That's a pretty damn solid rate for players taken in the first when, again, we're looking at over the totality. Like 85 plus is something that you should try to strive for. For me, I had 87.5. Pretty happy with that. But round 1, he ended up doing a 2-round final mock draft. So round 1, he did 87.5. I only did 1 round, so that was my 87.5. So Mel ended up doing a great job there. In round number 2, and again, these are players who are available in round 1 and round 2 that matter in this equation, he was still 84.38% over all 64 picks. I think that is a great job. Again, full drafted is 85.94. When it comes to the exact player, having 20% is pretty awesome. I will say I can flex this, but I can't for very long. I got 25%. The reason why I can't flex is because Mel ended up beating me with 28% in the first, ended up having a little bit of a whiff in the second at 12.5. When it comes to the exact position, though, 50%. That is incredible. That matches mine for the entire first round where he ended up going 62.5%. You know how hard that is? That is really difficult to get 62.5% of every single pick. Just to contextualize that for you, that is 5 out of every 8 picks, right? So when you're thinking about it, what is that, 20 of the picks? He got either the exact player or the exact position. That is incredible. So keep that in mind. And again, he ended up whiffing with the trades I also did in terms of that draft because I think everybody thought the Chargers were trading with the Vikings. But regardless, again, you guys can end up seeing really quickly what he did well on. You know, he did well for New England, Buffalo, Cleveland, Tennessee, and Kansas City. And then the rest, he either did mediocre or relatively poor, in my opinion. Then we look at the NFC, and it was kind of a flip-flop. Remember, the AFC he did really well before. The NFC he did poorly. He bounced back. I love to see Mel bouncing back. End up getting really good scores for the majority of these teams, including Chicago with multiple. With Minnesota, he did end up having, I believe, J.J. McCarthy as part of a trade-up. So I do think that was part of the deal, which is why I kept it at 100%. Because, again, he missed out on the trades. No need to double ding him. When he ended up choosing for Minnesota, he was 100% correct. Now, this is what matters, right? We looked at it year by year. This is what truly matters, is how he's performed overall. So when you look at it, players taken on average 87%, 86.84. That's incredible. When you also look at round 1, over 87%. Remember that round 2, there's only one of them in there, so it's still that 84%. But, you know, on average for the mocks that we do, 87%. Like first round, 87 is incredible. I'm at 83. Just keep that in mind. Like, I feel like I do a pretty good job, but again, people are talking about Mel Kiper as being ass. Let's just be real. We're going to be evaluating all of these guys, and we're going to see them up against each other. We'll have one big battle at the end, but I do think this is something that needs to be focused on. When it comes to the exact player, a 16.25% is great, especially when you put it in the context of 18.85 in the first round, which for me, it is 16.8. Again, I've only done round 1. When you look at the exact position, 46.2 for, remember, exact position or the exact player. Both of them count for this. 46.24, 50.4 in round number 1. I am at 39.9, and he is yet to get a trade right. So ultimately, we know that, okay, Mel's accurate. What teams has he been accurate for versus which teams has he not? This is why I ended up including it in all of the other ones, because this is what truly, truly matters. So what teams can we trust Mel with? All the green teams, I feel like he has pretty well. If it's over 33%, you know, if you're doing 1 out of 3 perfectly right, I feel like you're doing a good job. So for Mel, I mean, when it comes to Jacksonville, he's been spot on. Kansas City, Tennessee, Cleveland, and Buffalo. 50% and above is beautiful. Now, I think he's done a good job for Pittsburgh and New England. And then, I mean, even New York, again, they're getting shortchanged even though they have the same exact color. Or they have the exact opposite color for the same exact score. But for essentially New York, when you end up also looking at New England, Pittsburgh, Indy, Houston, and Los Angeles, you can take what he says with a grain of salt, but it's actually a little bit more insight than maybe what might come to the eye or might be something that you can feel with your gut. When it comes to the Vegas Raiders, in 3 years, he hasn't gotten a single thing right. With Denver, to be fair, they haven't really had a ton of picks, so he still hasn't done it right. For Cincinnati, it's been bad. He's been pretty unreliable there. Do not really trust him fully on the Cincinnati train. And then you look at Baltimore. That's quite surprising because Baltimore just goes with best player available. I'm honestly quite surprised at that low. And then Miami is kind of a wild card, so I think that's perfectly acceptable. For the NFC, you look at what he has done well, and technically Chicago should be in pink. That's apologies for me. Whenever you get above 75%, I try to put it in pink. Chicago is not green or not yellow. It is in pink. But I'm not telling you you're colorblind, but I'm saying that I made a mistake there. Chicago has been nearly perfect on 83.3%. When it comes to the other teams, there are Washington, Dallas, Green Bay, and Carolina. Like those teams, he is extremely reliable. Again, when you're at 50% or over, I really do trust your opinion on those. And I need to weight them a little bit heavier maybe than some other analysts out there, even including myself. When you look at New Orleans, New York, it's above that okay range. So I really love to see that. And then when you analyze, you see Arizona in there as well. It's another team where it's like, hey, doing a good job above that 1 out of every 3. With Minnesota and Tampa Bay, it's kind of a shot in the dark, but you might end up actually hitting something with him. And then when it comes down to the Rams, I mean, for Seahawks, man, 0% is insane. San Francisco, Atlanta at 12-5. I mean, Atlanta's been pretty off the rockers. I'm not a huge fan of their organization. So honestly, I think that just shows Atlanta's lack of logic. For Detroit, seeing that 25% is a little bit nutty to me. And then the biggest thing for me is Philadelphia. Like, I thought for some reason he was much more accurate with Philly than anything else. And it's arguably his worst because you look at the amount of picks Philly has had as well. And I would have given him credit if he took a wide receiver for Philly back when they ended up having multiple picks. Just got to give you guys a little insight there. But the ultimate verdict is Mel Kiper washed? No. I mean, if you look at it year over year, this guy is consistently like 85 plus. That is very, very, very solid. I'm someone who likes to use a lot of logic. And yeah, this past year, I matched Mel. That's cool for the first round in terms of players taken. I beat him on the exact picks. Like, cool. Congrats, right? Like, whoop-de-fucking-do. He's had like decades of this. So for people trying to say he sucks, we don't agree with him, right? And that's supposed to happen. That's going to happen. But ultimately, Mel Kiper does a damn good job. But maybe when it comes to teams like Philadelphia, Seattle, Detroit, etc., maybe take his picks with a grain of salt. But if you're a fan of the teams that he does well with, might be something worth listening to. Thank you so much for watching. Love you. See you on the far side.